The VVN Music Interviews are brought to you by VVN Music. Get the latest news on the veteran artists of rock, pop, soul, country, folk, and blues at vvnmusic.com. And by audible.com. Now you can get a free book download from their library of over 180,000 titles by going to audibletrial.com/VVN. Hi, and welcome to episode 48 of the VVN Music Interviews. I'm Roger Wink, and our guest is Paula Cole. Paula began singing jazz in the clubs around her native Boston, and through contacts, her unreleased debut album Harbinger was heard by Peter Gabriel's music director, who convinced the singer to have Paula join his Secret World tour. The exposure in the Harbinger album got her signed to Warner Brothers, where she released the Grammy-nominated This Fire, which included the hits Where Have All the Cowboys Gone and I Don't Want to Wait. To date, Cole has released 8 studio albums, including her latest, Ballads, which contains 20 cover songs from the Great American Songbook and the world of Americana. Well, thank you so much for calling in. I'm going to attempt to keep my professionalism here, as I've really been a fan for the last couple decades of your music.
Oh, thank you so much, Roger.
Your new album, Ballads, is the first one you've recorded where you didn't write most of the material. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What made you decide to go in that direction?
It's not my brain that makes these decisions. It's my soul. It kind of guides me there unconsciously, and it just felt long overdue that I was to make my own jazz album. And I kept singing on other people's jazz albums. And I started as a jazz singer. A few people know that, but not too many. And I needed to do it. And my father's getting older, and this was for him too, just as much as it was for me. And this was on my bucket list, and I knew I needed to do it next. In my heart, I knew it.
Well, you know, what's impressive about it is the sheer breadth of genres that you've adapted to your style, you know, from the obvious, which would be Billie Holiday and Nina Simone, to John Coltrane, to even Bob Dylan in a couple of cuts. How did you go about picking the songs?
That was so hard. And if you came to my home studio, you'd see pieces of paper plastered all over the walls with my hand scratch notes. And I probably started with about 40 songs. We recorded 31. And 30 out of those 31 songs I'm really happy with. And I just had far too much material. The poor guys, they thought I was a slave driver. I had so much to say about this, and I had waited so long in my life to do it that I needed to record a lot of material every day. And I had arrangements in my head. Sometimes I wrote them out. Also, my piano player, she's so amazing, Consuelo. She did some charts. Most of it was my arranging. Also, Peter Eldridge, this beautiful jazz singer, Peter Eldridge, who sings with New York Voices. He did an arrangement for one song there. But I had the content. I was just trying to whittle it down. But we recorded 31. And it took a lot of listening and processing to think of what songs would go together. And I could have skewed it more Americana, or I could have skewed it more jazz. But for me, one of the big points of the album is to combine these things because it's all classic American music. It's the great American canon. And I think Ode to Billie Joe should absolutely be next to God Bless the Child. And a lot of it is blues-based, or, you know, maybe there's extrapolations of that into more complex chord changes, but really these are beautiful American classics, and I felt they should be performed side by side and regarded side by side. And let's break down the genres a little bit, and let's look at the classic nature of these beautiful songs. They span largely the 1930s to the 1960s.
It sounds to me, then, that there's a perfect opportunity for a deluxe version of the album down the road.
Yeah, there's 10 more songs still waiting, and they're good, too. I'm happy with those.
You already mentioned that you did a lot of the arranging for the album. Did you also produce?
Yes, yeah. That's very much in my wheelhouse anyway, so, and I can think about it for a long time before the session and make arrangements and form the band and book the sessions. And I've been doing that my whole career for the most part anyway. So it was just very much a natural extension. And as far as whittling it down to 20, I mean, and that's a double album, but it was kind of trial and error with sequencing, and that's what I finally, the light bulb finally went off, and I thought it should be 20. It should be significant, and 20 is a nice round number, and these songs sounded right together.
Well, it's also kind of generous because even though with the age of digital there aren't the limitations of, say, the length of an LP or the length of a CD, people still seem to stick around the 12 or 14 that's always been traditional. So the fact that you gave the fans 20 is, as I said, generous. Thanks.
And we pressed double vinyl, too. For those early folks that were on my Kickstarter campaign, they ended up getting 2 albums, for the price of one. And I love my support system. I love my fans. I wouldn't be here in this crazy business without them supporting me through all of the changes of the landscape of the music business. So, yeah, on a CD, you can fit 80 minutes of music, I think. And this, I think, clocked in around 75 minutes of music.
I don't have the credits here in front of me, but it sounds like you were working with a core of maybe 3 musicians and a few guests for horns and woodwinds and so forth. Who was in the band?
Yes, the band, the core really was Jay Bellerose on drums, who's my longtime drummer, and we grew up musically together, and we were both influenced by a lot of jazz musicians. He plays a lot now in LA with T-Bone Burnett and Joe Henry, and is increasingly on a lot more jazz albums because people are realizing about Jay as well, that he's a jazz player. Dennis Crouch on upright bass, who's more Nashville-based. He's just got a big sound and is swinging and grounded and plays a gorgeous supportive bass. And then I've got Consuelo Candelaria on piano, and she's probably swings the most jazz out of the whole quintet. And I have her husband, they're a husband and wife team, on guitar, Kevin Barry. So they practice at home together, and they come up with all these unique comping and harmonic chords that they stay out of each other's way, and they really are just this secret in the sauce. This husband and wife team on the rhythm section, beautiful together. And then Chris Bruce on guitar as well, who's LA-based and kind of comes from a more soul roots perspective. So people like Chris are kind of holding it down and providing more sonic texture, while Consuelo and Kevin are soloing more and going out with the jazz voicings a little more. If you're following my language, I'm speaking like great. Okay, great.
So you mentioned that it's your longtime drummer. I assume that the rest of the players on this album are not normally part of your regular band.
Actually, Chris Bruce, Jay, we are on tour a lot together. So we play my originals, and then we can move into ballads. I also tour sometimes with Kevin Barry, but he's out a lot with Roseanne Cash lately. So, he's been busy lately. But Kevin, Jay, and I are the original trio from since when I was 19 years old, and I was there at Kevin and Consuelo's wedding because I was roommates with Consuelo at Berklee College of Music. So this is like family in a way. It's like a down-home family affair with a couple of guests. Yeah.
The other thing about the album that is striking, and we've kind of alluded to that a little bit, is your choice of songs, and that although there are a couple on there that are, for lack of a better word, standards. In other words, if you hear other people's standards albums, you will hear them on a regular basis. The vast majority are not really that standard fare. They're songs that you've chosen out of this vast canon of the Great American Songbook that are not always recognized. Oh,
I'd be curious to hear which ones you think those are. I'm so biased. I'm in my own bubble here.
Well, I mean, I think, let's see, let me bring up the track listing. I mean, God Bless the Child, Skylark, Body and Soul, Willow Weep for Me, Autumn Leaves are kind of ones that you would hear anywhere from a Ella Fitzgerald to a Rod Stewart Great American Songbook album. But songs like I'm Old Fashioned and Farewell My Friends, and even I Cover the Waterfront, which is a great song, but has not been covered all that much on those types of albums. I mean, are ones that you were able to draw out of that vast number of songs and reinterpret.
That's just because of all my years of listening to classic singers and also having been a jazz singer. I mean, I started in the lounges and the clubs of Boston, Cambridge area all through my student days. And I had my own book and my charts, and a lot of it comes down to, well, of course the melody, but do I relate to the lyric? And there are a lot of standards that I don't relate to the lyrics. And these songs, I put them together because I love the lyrics. I heard Billie Holiday sing I Cover the Waterfront with that beautiful long verse intro, and knew I needed to do that. It's a very old-fashioned song. And also something like Never Will I Marry. That's from just being a fan of jazz and listening to Cannonball Adderley with Nancy Wilson. That's such an unusual tune. You don't hear it very often. It's probably the most swinging, kind of up-tempo swinging tune. It's got layered trumpets on it. And that's just me being a fan of these singers like Nancy Wilson and Billie Holiday, and listening and being a jazz singer, living inside the songs. I sang those songs, I sang Never Will I Marry probably since my late teens in jazz clubs and the Airport Hilton Lounge at Boston Logan Airport on Thursday nights with Al Vega, man. I was there.
You know, probably my favorite track on the whole album is actually the last one, My One and Only Love, which is just this beautiful song that is so underutilized today. You don't hear it as much as you hear those, as I call them, standards. And I just think it's a beautiful version.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Roger. I mean, My One and Only Love is probably one of my favorite songs ever. And it's also Kevin Barry's favorite song. And so we love it both so much that I figured, let's break it down to be so intimate, just guitar and voice, just about the performance, the love of the music, the love that we feel in our hearts. And that we tried to capture that intimacy, and it came out so right that it had to be the last song.
You know, I could identify the vast majority of the songs here as far as, you know, not source, but, you know, their heritage. What about Farewell, My Friends? Where did that come from?
I've done some online research, and I don't know. It comes from the 1800s, and it's traditional, and that's the oldest song that's different from all of the others, which are, like I said earlier, like largely from the 30s to the 60s. But Farewell, My Friends is an American traditional piece that Peter Eldridge brought to my attention. Gosh, I don't have the credits in front of me, and I'm forgetting her name. Claudia. There's a folk singer, and I'm forgetting her last name, Claudia. She did a very kind of straight, beautiful vocal trio arrangement of it. So we were acknowledging that arrangement, but then kind of twisting it, drawing inspiration from Abbey Lincoln and Max Roach. And I don't know if you've ever, and this is for the real jazz fan, there are some Scandinavian video recordings of this Drive-A-Man suite. They called it Drive-A-Man. And it's in an odd meter time, as is Farewell, My Friends. And it's sparse, and it feels like a work song. And so we kind of drew in that element of, I guess, you know, like a Negro spiritual or a work song into a traditional American song that's really about saying goodbye to this life and looking forward to the life beyond, to something better. So we tried to combine American influences into the music.
You know, probably the track that stood out the most as far as the arrangement goes, just because it was so different, is Willow Weep for me. You took a song that is normally somewhere between a piece of pop music thing, can be given kind of a bluesy feel, and you've gotten this down and dirty swamp beat to it.
Oh, that's so funny. I think that's because I felt the world needs to hear Kevin Barry solo on, you know, an amazing 12/8 like that. he just raises the roof. We played a show in August, and he just raised the freaking roof playing that solo. So that was an honoring of Anne Rennell, Willow Wheat, few female writers of American standards I came to notice, but also honoring Kevin Barry on guitar. He's just so burning, and I felt like I could combine the sadness of the lyric and drive it more in a 12/8, like real blues, real, let's go for it, and be more muscular with my singing, and then allow Kevin to take, the baton from me and take it and raise the roof. That's just me knowing my musicians, knowing the songs really well, and then going from there.
I could be wrong on this, but and I hope I'm pronouncing this name right. On John Coltrane's Naima, it also seemed to me, because it's more of an instrumental than a vocal track. I mean, your vocals are there, but it almost seems like you were showcasing the instrumentalists in the band more on that one.
I've always loved that song. Naima is how I say it, and I hear other people say Naima. I'd love to know for sure myself, but I've had, these jazz standard real books at home by the piano, and I've been leafing through them since I was 17 years old, and my dad's fake books and real books too. And I came across Naima. I mean, I would just go through the A's and the B's and the C's and get to the end, and there's Naima, and it was just so different from other songs. There are lyrics written by John Hendricks from Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross, but they don't feel right for me. And again, that's part of my struggle as a jazz singer, and one of the reasons why I didn't become a jazz singer in my early career is that the lyrics weren't always right. I wanted to write my own lyrics. And I thought about writing my own set of lyrics for it, but in the end I thought, no, I'm going to keep it pure and try to channel the purity and the ethereal gentleness of Coltrane's horn as best I can, and have it be wordless to go to the melody. It's such a swooping melody, so I just tried to be gentle and ethereal with it to honor Coltrane.
While the album is called Ballads, I would argue that there's about 5 or 6 songs on there that would go beyond that description, have a little bit more of a beat, a little bit more up-tempo. And I think that works really well on the album because it doesn't get bogged in one single tempo throughout. Did you have any reservations about including songs that might be a little bit more up-tempo on the album?
No, not at all. And as a producer or someone who's thinking about the whole of the project, you need relief. You need up-tempo songs to sequence the album well. So I needed some up-tempo, different feels, different keys. But I love ballads. It's what I do best. Me singing a standard ballad has always been my mother's favorite thing that I do, and I know that it's kind of one of my, I guess, I don't know, I think it's like one of the specialties for me, and I knew that my favorite songs they were the majority ballads, and so I looked up the definition of a ballad, and it isn't necessarily a slow tempo song. It's mostly the telling of a story. For instance, The Ballad of Hollis Brown by Bob Dylan. That's the title of his song from the Times They Are A-Changin' album, and he's telling the story of a poor farmer and his 5 kids and his wife and a South Dakota farm. So a ballad is really more than just a slow tempo piece of music. It's the telling of a story. We've also come to know it as a slow piece of music. Yes, it has a second definition, but it's all those things. And I wanted to break down the confines of what we think music is, whether it's, some people hear What a Little Moonlight Can Do and think it's a country track, but if you play it right next to Billie Holiday's version of What a Little Moonlight Can Do with the Teddy Wilson Orchestra, it sounds pretty much the same, and yet we think of one as jazz and one more country or Americana, or, a ballad as a slow song or a ballad as the telling of a story by a troubadour. What are these things? The music should be inclusive, and I think more about breaking down of genres and bringing people together.
Well, you mentioned I think most music is story songs. They come from a background of something that someone has gone through or something that they're aware of from other people. But there are a few on the album that are strong story songs, like an Ode to Billy Joe, like the 2 Bob Dylan tracks. Do you find when you're singing something that's pure story like that it isn't so much emotion that drives the track, but it's the story as if you were singing a book?
Yes, they're a lot more wordy. There's a lot more words, and therefore the melody is a lot less of an arc, a giant arc, the way, say, Skylark would be. So you modify, or you sing it a little more plain, but there's an art to that. I like understatement. I love artists like Billie Holiday, who's singing for the lyric, always. Chet Baker is an understated artist. I love how he's understated. And Ode to Billy Joe, well, let's tell the story. It's not my opportunity to show off my voice or riff. It's about telling this most amazing story. And occasionally, if you're feeling it in your heart, then something extra will come out. And the way we performed the Ballad of Hollis Brown, it's much more open. That one has a lot more expression because I was influenced by Nina Simone on this version of the Ballad of Hollis Brown. She has this very driving B minor kind of piano part, and the band can be wildly interpretive because we're just holding down this B minor to flat 7 progression over and over and over to kind of drive home the poverty and this cycle of pain that Hollis Brown is going through. And we illustrate the lyrics by getting more gentle or using more legato, or I sing higher, I go up more, or I get more quiet, because there are 11 verses on that song. That's a lot of lyrics, and that's a long story. So I think that one is perfect for more wild interpretation instead of just over and over and over repetitive vocally and instrumentally. We're kind of exploring it more. So yes, the words can restrict you, but not necessarily. Not if you rearrange it.
Over the last, and I hate to say this, 5 decades, I've seen hundreds of concerts, and it's very, very rare that a member of the band or of the backup singers stand out to the point where they threaten to almost overtake the spotlight from the headliner. And I saw that about 22, 23 years ago on Peter Gabriel's Secret World Tour, where your talent really just shined above all in that show.
That's so incredibly kind, and that was such a magnificent experience for me. And I love his music so much, and I was just so grateful for the experience, and I learned so much. And I learned too that I wanted to be my own artist. And he was an amazing teacher. I just felt so lucky to be there. But that's incredibly nice of you to say that. Thank you.
How did you get that tour? If I remember correctly, he originally had Sinead O'Connor on there, and you replaced her. How did you come to audition or be chosen to take over that part? A producer named Kevin Killen, he produced my first album, Harbinger. And it was Kevin that gave it to David Rhodes, who is Peter's best mate and, the musical director of his touring band. He's a guitar player. And David Rhodes is very picky, and Peter trusts his judgment a lot. And David heard it and said, "You need to listen to this, Peter." And so Harbinger, let me just
backstory a little bit. He was recorded in the can, waiting to be released. I'm touring around in coffee houses in America, but it's not released. And Peter heard it and just point blank called my answering machine and asked me to join the tour. Just like that. He had that much faith in it, and I think he did ask Kevin, do you think she can handle this? And he said absolutely. And then I was flown to Mannheim, Germany on Halloween of 1993, and I had one rehearsal with Peter. We sang Don't Give Up, and then that night I was thrown out in front of 16,000 Germans, and I had to be ready for that. I had seen the tour a couple of times. There were 2 stages, lots of moving parts, and I was ready because I was such a fan of the music.
You must have had to also be a quick study on, I don't know if I want to call it choreography, but on the dance moves on songs like Shakin' the Tree and Sledgehammer and so forth. That I don't know if that was there in the beginning or if it just developed over your time with the tour.
Oh, no. I mean, that video was filmed like just a few days after I joined. So they're not that hard, those dance moves. But I just, you catch up on, you just catch it. I'm a musician. I loved his songs. I loved the tour. And I just was ready. I just grasped it. It came to me easily. I felt like I was meant to be there. Gosh, when I heard Don't Give Up as a teenager, I knew in my bones I had to sing that song somehow, somewhere.
And you got to do it many nights over for a while, traveling all over the world.
I know. I'm crazy.
Now, you're an alumni of the Berklee School of Music, but you're also teaching there now, correct?
Correct.
Are you there as a full-time teacher or adjunct, or?
I'm full professor. I'm there 2 days a week, and they allow me to sub out so that I can work. And so that's a wonderful arrangement, and I feel very appreciated by them. It's my alma mater, like you said, and I have beautiful friendships, people that I went to school with who are my friends and are also faculty. So it's a wonderful community. It's a special place in the world. So it's really good to be back, and I have that during the academic year to go to and to be involved with the next generation. I learn a lot as much from them. It's a changing world, and I'm learning it through their eyes as well.
It's funny you say that because I've talked to Melissa Manchester a couple times, and she was teaching at one of the USC branches, and she's now at Citrus College, which is a community college in California, but they have this amazing recording program out there. And one of the things that she said right along is that not only is she teaching the students, but they're also teaching her, as you said, about the current trends in music and the industry, and even more so in social media, which she says has become so important in promotion. And like you did Kickstarter, she did Indiegogo for her last 2 albums, and that was completely driven by her talks with the students. So you obviously feel the same way, that they are giving back as much as you're giving.
Yes, I mean, especially when you encounter a diamond, an artist that will really have a shot at making it in the world. It's just wonderful to see through their eyes, and also just learning about the culture and the developmental space they occupy just as people, not even necessarily musically, but just their consciousness about the world. It definitely keeps me young. It keeps me using, the right language for things. I see that with people who aren't involved in the world, and I've been in danger of that a few times. If you sequester and you don't work and you're not involved in the world, and so you're not speaking the language, it's easy to kind of ossify. But I'm here with kids, and it's hard sometimes. I'm Gen X, they're millennials, or Gen Z. It's different. They live on their phones. I'm learning their language, even in politically correct ways, like gender equity or identity. there's a whole new language with that today. I learn from them. And it keeps me current and aware and kind of more sympathetic. And hopefully they're learning from me too.
Are you teaching industry or jazz or vocal technique? What type of class are you teaching?
I teach singers how to relate and communicate with a band in ensembles. I do teach some private voice, but mostly I teach songwriting, and it kind of is a therapeutic individuating process. A lot of journaling. We do listening, and I try to give them examples of some of the great artists, I think, the Joni Mitchells and the John Lennons, these autobiographical writers who are courageous and who changed over the course of a career. They were brave to change, make change, sometimes at the expense of, their fan base. They would lose fans if, like Joni did when she did her Mingus album. Or, John Lennon went into primal scream therapy and quit the Beatles, found Yoko, and then he came out with Plastic Ono Band. It happens to be one of my favorite albums. I think it's important that people see the arc over a lifetime of a real artist, someone who is questing and thirsting for truth and change and is brave that way. So I'm trying to put them on a course for thinking outside the box and looking within, following their intuition, being brave to be autobiographical. So that's what my songwriting courses tend to be about.
It would seem to me that it would be hard. I'm not sure hard's the word I want to use. Maybe dangerous. When you are teaching songwriting and then evaluating the songs written by the students, and then on another part of your life that you are writing your own original songs, you probably have to make a conscious decision to forget about what others have, because it would be so. Some of their music might be subconsciously in there. Am I making sense on that question?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And I do hear tons and tons of songs every week. I know I wouldn't, remember half of it, but and that would have been true even just being in the world, not with students necessarily, but say playing festivals and hearing other people's songs. And music is cultural borrowing. We've been doing that for ages and ages and ages. John Lennon nicked so many things from other artists. So many artists do, unconsciously or consciously. And yes, you have to ask yourself questions. Is this, am I borrowing here? Or is this flagrant? I don't feel it's really happened to me so much. And I'm not in a writing place right now anyway, so I'm not worried about that. I'm really just not worried about it. Because it's such a kind of personal process for me anyway when I write. But we're looking at a long legacy of, borrowing. Music is a big melting pot.
Well, I've always wondered when, person X takes person Y to court because a sequence of notes are the same. It's like there's only so many notes and they can only be put in so many combinations. It has to happen eventually.
Yeah. Or words, I think a lyric and melody is, possibly the definition of a copyright still. I'm not sure about all that. I don't even want to know about all that.
What do you see in the future as far as once you're done with the release of Ballads and I know you're going out touring in support of it. Any plans for the future?
Yeah, I know what I'm doing short term. There's a lot of shows on the calendar. I'm going to have a very busy October and a very busy February, April. I want to get back to Europe, and I'll be working Ballads, through 2018. I have those 10 other songs waiting for me, and I have a few other things on my bucket list as far as musical and non-musical projects. So I have some non-musical projects I want to do. I'd very much like to write a book, so that's waiting for me, and that seems to be getting a little more demanding in my subconscious. And another live album. I'd like to make a Live Essentials album. There are some definitely some things on the bucket list. And then whenever the muse hits, I will be writing and gathering material.
Great. I look forward to it. Paula, thank you so much for giving us a call. And
oh, absolutely. And thank you for your support.
Yeah, it really is a great album. It's great to hear some of these songs that you don't hear every day out of the Great American Songbook and out of the Americana Songbook. That it's great to hear them and with these really nice arrangements.
Oh, thank you. I love this music. Thank you for your support again.
The VVN Music Interviews can be heard via iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Libsyn, and the VVN Music website. For the latest news on the veteran artists of rock, pop, soul, country, folk, and blues, go to vvnmusic.com. If you have any comments or questions about the website or this podcast, please send them to vvnnetwork@gmail.com. The VVN Music Podcast is a production of the VVN Network, copyright 2017.